Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lara, adoptee, psychotherapist and adoption researcher. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the 6 tools that this channel is all about. So I have given you the background about the research, I've given you the background about why I conducted the research and why it matters, and so this video is really the findings of that research in list form. So what has fallen out the bottom, if you like, of all of that research in terms of things that adoptees of the future need, and therefore tools that you as a prospective adopter or adoptive parent can start to think about and incorporate into your life with your adopted child. The first is an adoptive parent with a secure attachment style. Now, this is a nice to have. Attachment theory is one way of understanding relationships. You may have heard all about somebody with an insecure attachment style or an avoidant attachment style. And adoptees very often fall into either of those groups, and sometimes ambivalent attachment style. But what we're talking about here is the attachment style of the parent, the adopting parent. Now you'll say, well, I really have no idea what my attachment style is. It's absolutely worth thinking about because an adoptee needs to know that they can trust the adopted parent to be there with unconditional love. We all know that that's going to be trying and very testing from time to time, but in terms of achieving the best outcomes for the adopted child, a parent with a secure attachment style is really the ideal. Now, our attachment styles are formed in childhood and they're very much dependent on the experiences of relationships that we have very early on, and those can be compounded by later relationships. And the way that we view ourselves within relationships, we take those into our adult relationships, but also very often into our parenting style. So this is the ideal, somebody with a secure attachment style that would be able to give that child unconditional love, that does not feel rejected themselves, does not feel pushed out themselves, does not play games emotionally and psychologically themselves. If you feel that you may have some of these ways of being, you can deal with some of those in therapy, pre-adoption, and just start to work on some of those things. So that's number one, a parent with a secure attachment style, because your child will need to know that you're there reliably and with constancy and consistency, no matter what they put you through. Number two, an adoptive parent who, if they cannot conceive and have decided to adopt as a result of the inability to conceive, that they have dealt with that loss. The inability to conceive represents a loss in both a man and a woman's life, more especially in a woman's life. A woman is designed for childbirth, a woman is designed to carry a baby. The inability and the discovery of the inability to carry a child naturally is something that is a huge loss for a woman. And so it's really vital in terms of adoption that if that's you, that you deal with that before you bring another person's child into your home. So what I'm talking about there is that you have worked through the grief, that you have worked through the loss, that you have worked through the loss of your own child in your own life and all of that meaning that that brings to you before you embark on the path of adopting. Number 3 is the ability to mentalize the experience of the adopted child. In my last video, I talked about the 6 struggles that adoptees will have, some of them unconscious and later more conscious struggles. But what is vital for you as an adoptive parent is that you have the ability to mentalize their experience. And what we mean by mentalize is essentially to put yourself in their shoes. That if you're in the middle of a difficult conversation or a difficult situation, that you can kind of put yourself in the situation that they're in to understand what that might feel like and bear in mind some of those struggles that we spoke about yesterday. Now, obviously, you're not going to do parenting 100% right all the time. That would be impossible. Nobody's perfect, and there are going to be times that that, you slip up and you end up not being able to put yourself in your child's shoes given what they're going through. But the idea that you can conceptually mentalize what they're going through is really, really important for the quality of your relationship with your child over time. Number 4 is an adoptive parent who is psychologically ready, willing, and prepared to work with issues of separation trauma, loss, identity, and later contact. That's absolutely vital for the well-being of your child, that your child will feel able to work through these issues with you and can trust that you are able to handle that. That's a really important part of it, is that, if your child feels that there's something that they need to discuss with you in terms of their anxiety about the separation, the loss that they're going through, their own struggles with their identity, and then later, as I mentioned in my last video, issues of fantasizing about the biological parent, they're going to need to know that they can come to you in a safe space to discuss that with you, and that you are not going to take that as a personal affront on you, that you're not going to take that personally. So what that means is that you're psychologically ready, open, and willing to work with those issues, which are separation anxiety, loss, identity formation, and later contact. Number 5, as an extension to number 4, that you're not just psychologically ready and prepared to do that, but that you actively encourage those conversations, so that you are encouraging open discourse around these things. Adoptees feel very often a sense of betrayal towards you for the feelings that they have, and for me, in my own case, that resulted in years and years and years of unnecessary guilt. Had my mum known some of these things, we would have had conversations about how it felt for me being adopted. We would have had conversations about my identity. We might have had conversations about what it felt like to think about my biological mum and how I was imagining her in my mind. As it was, my mum knew none of these things, and so she didn't encourage those conversations. I was left to have those thoughts in my own head. That led to, as I said, many, many years of guilt. Your adopted child has enough to deal with. They don't want to have to deal with feelings of guilt for potentially betraying you. And that brings me to number 6, which is one of the things that I feel very strongly about as a therapist, but many people feel very strongly about, that actually all adopted children, as they move through into early teenagers and adolescence, should be able to have therapy as standard. At that point in their lives, they are going to be exploring some of these issues in a more conscious way. They're going to be grappling with their identity. They're going to be trying to understand who they are in the world. They're going to be trying to understand a whole host of things. Little known fact maybe, but most adoptees fantasize about seeing somebody who they have a physical resemblance to. Now, that is something that many of us struggle and suffer with in silence. So for that to happen and for that to evolve in a healthy way, therapy is absolutely vital. How do you grow up in a world where maybe you're the only one adopted in your environment, you're the only one who's adopted in your school? It's hard enough through adolescence, grappling with identity formation and understanding who you are in the world anyway, without the added complication of knowing that you're adopted. So therapy is not as yet available as standard for adoptees. And I would strongly suggest that if you're the parent of a child that you've adopted and you're adoptive parenting practice, and you have a child approaching the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, all around that time, that you allow for that child to have therapy or counselling to discuss some of this stuff. Hopefully, if you followed this model, you're already having open conversations within the house. And that's super important, actually, not just the parents, but siblings, and for siblings to be involved, be those siblings adopted or not. It's really important for everyone in the house to have this open communication environment where your adopted child feels safe enough to bring this up whenever they have feelings. So I will list the 6 again in the description. But those are the 6 points. And very quickly to recap, number 1, an adoptive parent with a secure attachment style or who is actively working on their attachment style. Number 2, an adoptive parent who has grieved for, processed and overcome any loss for not being able to have their own child biologically, conceive their own child and give birth to their own child before they adopt. Number 3, an adoptive parent who has the ability to mentalize the experience of their adopted child. Number 4, an adoptive parent who is psychologically willing, ready and open to work with issues of loss, separation anxiety, trauma, identity and later contact. Number 5, a parent who's not only ready to do that, but who is actively willing to start those conversations, including the whole family, sometimes on your own, but sometimes with other members of the family, a good balance. The point of that is that we don't want this to become something that your child is scared to bring up. So by you initiating that conversation, you're giving a message that this is okay, this is a normal thing that we talk about and we get it, we understand, we can mentalize that. Number 6, if you have the means, seek out an adoption competent therapist. Seek out somebody who understands the issues that adoptees are going through and are grappling with. I hope you found that helpful. I'll link, as I say, the 6 things in the description below. And if you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. I hope you find all of this, as I say, super helpful. And the point of this is that you can have the best possible relationship with your child. We all know that our childhoods impact us as adults. And so to have a decent chance of well-being in adulthood, we need to have an open and safe and secure environment in childhood where we can express and explore some of these issues. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.